I start off every painting with a sketch that I like to go over with a burnt umber wash. This is to simply seal it, so when I put the oils over top, it's not going to smear with the lead or contaminate the color of the actual oil paint. So on my palette I have cadmium red debut, cadmium scarlet, cadmium orange, that is magenta, Windsor blue, cobalt blue, burnt umber, Naples yellow, cadmium yellow, Windsor green, soft mixing white, and linseed oil. You don't always have to use these kinds of colors. You can always just use your primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. For the first phase of the painting, I like to just prime everything and cover everything. So I load my bristle brush with some of the linseed oil and pigment, which was Windsor blue, and I went all over everything. And then for a dark color, I mixed some Windsor green, maybe some blue, and maybe some brown, maybe even a little touch of orange, just to get a suggestion of vegetation at the bottom that I'll later be painting over, and I just fuzzed it down. So now I'm going for the sky. And when I'm painting a sky, I sometimes like to paint it a couple times over, and I'm using a consistency of like a couple different colors that I mixed up. So for the clouds, it's a darker color. It's like something that is probably burnt umber, blue, maybe a little touch of magenta to get these darker clouds, and then maybe some lighter clouds with some cobalt blue. But I decide what I'm going to use, and then I use that consistently. And as I blend everything down, what happens is it will gray everything down, and it'll give me a kind of grayed version of all the colors that I'm using, so I can just use those same colors on top to build, if that makes sense. It's just my own way of painting a painting. So now I'm going in and I am working in some of the vegetation, and sometimes you need to go over vegetation a couple times just to get some texture. Go in with some darks and then maybe some lights at the same time and blend it together, starting with the lights. And for the sky, I wanted it to be like kind of orangey highlights, as if Jesus is creating this halo effect where he's like the source of light, where he's the one that's saving you. And so I thought it would be great if he's parting the clouds and is that beam of light source. You can make light source anything you want, really. So I'm just painting in some olive branches because I thought the symbolism of extending an olive branch and to save your soul into the greenery. Now I'm painting his hair, and his hair is dark, so I mainly stick to a dark color, then maybe a medium tone, and then a highlight to just give his hair some shine, just to give it some life. And when I start a face, I always start with the darks, and then what I did here was I used maybe only 2 to 3 different colors for the skin, and I use those colors consistently, and you see as I blend it down, it creates that grayed version. So I can go over again on top, like you see here, with that fresh color again, and it just gives you that illusion of vibrancy. So that's the part where it cut off, and I worked on the face more, and there's more of a progression, but you'll be able to get to see the progression of a face with the character I have down below, the man that's pulling the chains as well. I always like to start with the darks, and I always incorporate darks from the background into the characters, and as well as highlights. And a good technique when you're painting skin is to put your darks down and then put that reddish orangey color, that mid-tone, right next to the dark, and then your highlight and all that, the rest of that stuff down. And then what you do is you blend the lighter colors together, and it kind of like blends it down, as you see here as I'm doing the hands, and it just gives you a different version of vibrancy, if that makes sense, of that color. But I'm simply using these colors that I have originally mixed together, pre-mixed, consistently. And I'm just layering and kind of just getting form as I go. I don't always get form in one fell swoop, I certainly don't. It's just a process of putting your lights, your darks. I usually like to put the darks down first to get an idea of the value of the lights. And I usually really start very simple when I'm first blocking in these colors. So that means, what I mean by that is I try to use bigger, broader strokes in the beginning just to cover everything. So that way I can work in, and as I progress, I use smaller and smaller brushes. So as I'm laying down this color, you'll see that I like to lay down the darks and then that reddish kind of mid-tone right next to the darks, and then the highlights. So when I blend, I'll start with blending the highlights into the mid-tone, and then the mid-tone into the darks, and then kind of blend all over again. And as I'm working along, it just gives me a fresh eye when I blend everything down, where to start again, where I need the darker darks and the lighter lights. And then what happens is form will emerge. And I usually really start very simple when I'm first blocking in these colors. So that means, what I mean by that is I try to use bigger, broader strokes in the beginning just to cover everything. So that way I can work in, and as I progress, I use smaller and smaller brushes. So as I'm laying down this color, you'll see that I like to lay down the darks and then that reddish kind of mid-tone right next to the darks, and then the highlights. So when I blend, I'll start with blending the highlights into the mid-tone, and then the mid-tone into the darks, and then kind of blend all over again. And as I'm working along, it just gives me a fresh eye when I blend everything down, where to start again, where I need the darker darks and the lighter lights. And then what happens is form will emerge. So I usually like to leave paintings up for interpretation, but I feel that I should explain the point of my painting, the inspiration for it. And it really is just about salvation from guilt and shame and pain and all the things that bury people from being their true selves, and how Earth represents, especially with its vegetation, it kind of represents a stronghold on people, especially our fleshly bodies, and it kind of keeps us from truly grasping on to faith. Instead, we would rather hold on to those chains that keep us down. Like in the words of Jim Morrison, people are terrified to be set free. They hold on to their chains. They fight anyone who tries to break those chains. It's their security. How can they expect me or anyone else to set them free if they don't really want to be free? And that's just really what it's about, is freeing yourself from chains that you've been holding on for your whole life. that have become chains that could be very rusty, that's affecting your heart and affecting and making you bitter and making you resentful of following certain maybe politics or religions that is creating a source of divinity within all human beings. And that's just the point, is you can't really find acceptance and love within human beings. Human beings, we're all different and we come from all walks of life and we all have reasons for believing in what we believe. Some of us were taught to be a certain way. Some of us were abused into being a certain way and damaged into being a certain way. And of course there's going to be arguing and division amongst all of us. But really all of that arguing is petty. It's a waste of time, and you're not going to try to change somebody's mind, and you're never going to find true freedom through those politics, those groups, those religions. All they do is give you toxic affirmation and surround you with other people who have the same problems, so you're all just chained down together, aggravating those old wounds, the bitterness, the resentment that you've held on to for so long, that's kept you so empty and so hungry for acceptance, looking to people. People are flawed. We are all flawed. And you can't expect them to fix your problems. Nobody has all the answers. Humans can only really theorize and speculate what has been transplanted around us. And I'll tell you this, there is no amount of psychology or science or any of this stuff that you can possibly read, which are things that are always ever changing and always being discovered and always being contradicted. And there doesn't always have to be a completely rational explanation for everything. That there's so much explanation going on that there's not enough feeling, that we're losing touch with our souls, that the idea of a soul is being washed away. And in the midst of all of this, we are forgetting about our hearts and what drives our hearts to do the things that we do, to fuel our passions. That these chains that come in the form of politics and movements and religion, which are all just very man-made things, which, guess what, are temporary, just like us, and flawed. And you'll never truly find love and acceptance in any of those things that keep us down, that chain our hearts up, keep us divided. And I'm here to tell you that no matter how damaged or broken or far gone you think you are, or confused or even scared, and no matter how much man and all of its creations have failed you, there is still love and acceptance, not in politics or religion, but in a relationship with Jesus Christ. And like all relationships, it has to be reciprocal. And if he sees that you really are trying, and maybe even struggling to get those chains off, then he'll wholeheartedly and unconditionally, with great ease and assuredness, relinquish you and unchain your heart.
Unchain my heart, baby, let me be. Well, please set me free.